On Saturday, sunny again with a high near 70 degrees. It's 39 degrees right now in Charlotte.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, controversy swirls around the person chosen to head the mayor's racial equity initiative. We fill you in. Mecklenburg County Commissioner Ella Scarborough asks for a medical leave of absence after being MIA for almost a year. That too creates some controversy. Voter maps rejected by the state Supreme Court are being worked on by the legislature, but when they return to the court for review, the court will use a remapping expert to judge them. Plus, mask mandates are starting to fall, and Mecklenburg appears to be on the cusp of making some announcement to that end. And CMPD rolls out its plan for reducing crime. To take us through those stories and more is the Microsoft Sound Plus WFAE's political reporter, Steve Harrison. He's here. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Katie Peralta-Soloff is a reporter for Axios Charlotte. Good morning, Katie.
Morning.
Hunter Sines is with us. He's a reporter anchor for WCNC TV. Hunter, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
And Mary C. Curtis is with us. She's a columnist for Roll Call and host of their podcast, Equal Time. Thank you for being back. Welcome.
Good morning.
Last week, I think it was WCNC that was the first to report that the woman chosen by the Charlotte Regional Business Partnership to head the mayor's racial equity initiative and handle millions of dollars in the process in that job was targeted for an investigation in Ohio. State auditors there reported a lack of controls due to unemployment fraud and overpayments during Kimberly Henderson's tenure as the head of that state's Department of Job and Family Services. The agency evidently paid out $3.8 billion in fraudulent and inflated unemployment claims, which cost Ohio taxpayers about $400 million. She has not been charged with a crime. We should put that out front. But the Ohio Attorney General asked state and local police to launch a criminal investigation into Henderson and her staff. So, what, if anything, has been discovered in that investigation in Ohio? Anybody know?
Not in the criminal investigation. That's still a requested and ongoing part of the phase. I think you hit on just how many millions of dollars was overpaid or allegedly mishandled from the audit report. That is the results that we have right now.
Did she resign on her own? Did she resign because of the scandal? Was she asked to leave, or was it just a coincidence that she left when she did?
She left on her own terms, is our understanding of it. And we cannot pinpoint if this was the reason why.
So all of this is going on in Ohio, but in the interim, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance Partnership, which used to be the Charlotte Chamber, I think, chose her to head up the mayor's initiative. And they said that they were fully aware of the situation going on in Ohio and issued a statement of support for her as their choice. The mayor, Mayor Lyles, has also expressed her confidence in the hire. But at Monday's city council meeting, the mayor took the opportunity to tell people that neither she nor members of council played a role in that hiring decision. That's raised a lot of questions because it is her initiative. The mayor's name is at the top of the list there. And because of the money being collected and distributed. She was on this program on Wednesday, told us that concern over the public funding part of this is misplaced.
And I also want to make the point that there is no city money involved in this.
But Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but when this $250 million initiative was announced, didn't Mayor Lyles say that more than half of the money would come from the public sector?
Yeah, close to half. It's a $250 million program. $100 million will come from the public sector. There are four parts of the initiative. One is a kind of an effort to get local businesses and corporations to increase diversity in upper management. Kimberly Henderson will be working kind of directly with that piece of the program. There's no city money in that. That's kind of her total responsibility. And when the mayor was on the program, she kind of tended to be saying like that was all she would be doing and there's no city money in that. But that's just not correct, because she will also be the point person, the executive staff for the other 3 parts of the project. And 2 of those pieces, this bridging the digital divide and investing in corridors of opportunity, that is so far slated to receive $72 million in city money. So it's just, she is the main point person for this. There is going to be $100 million in public money. So it's just, it's not fair to say, as the mayor did, that there is no public money involved. I just don't see how you get there.
Well, just to reiterate that and to be clear, I asked the mayor for clarification on where that money is coming from. You're saying that there are no city funds, therefore no taxpayer dollars going into this initiative.
I am saying exactly that, because let me tell you how this is work. You remember the controversy over this. There were many discussions about it. The city has the responsibilities for the corridors of opportunity. That's the funding that we have set aside, $72 million to help our corridors. Now, in my belief, it's best that we work with the private sector to encourage minority businesses to have banking relationships and to have the ability to get grants and loans. But that money, the council has to make that decision. And we have been talking about this funding since our retreat earlier this year. And I think that there's probably a little bit of merit in this discussion being more political than it is effective.
When she said that, I didn't understand it, but then I thought
I still
about
don't
it.
understand it.
Well, Republican activist Larry Shaheen and the City Council Republican Tariq Bakari have both expressed misgivings about this hire. Is the mayor saying this controversy is just a political contrivance? Well, is that what she meant by that comment?
I think she was trying to get at that very subtly, or maybe not so subtly. But again, the clip that we just played, I kind of listened to that again, and I still don't really follow what the logic is and what, again, there's $72 million going to these 2 programs that Kimberly Henderson will be the point person to manage. That's it. I don't know, how to kind of go any deeper, or I don't understand another explanation for that.
Hunter.
It's an effort for them to, quite honestly, try to distance themselves from this as much as they can, in my personal view. And I know Steve has pointed this out time and time again on this program as well, but it's just comes down to a lack of transparency. They have not been transparent for any part of this initiative. They've had council members gripe about that as well from the very beginning. And then all of a sudden the city manager is coming back saying, well, if there's any public funds that are going to be used, you will still have a final say. But at the same time, council is not an advisory over this initiative, and they have outsourced all of that to this private alliance. So that's what it gets down to, is nobody really knows because they aren't being transparent about it.
And City Council has said that they want oversight of this money. And as you just said, the City Manager Marcus Jones has said City Council will still be voting on this, but the Charlotte Regional Business Partnership is a private organization. Can there be strings attached? Is there some agreement somewhere that says we get to vote on certain parts of this? Or is this just pie in the sky wishful thinking in the aftermath of all of this?
I think sorry, you go ahead, Hunter.
No, I'm probably going to say the same thing as far as how it was presented to both the private sector and the public sector when this whole thing was announced, was that it was a fundraising of money on both sides, and that the alliance and that this board that has many members were going to oversee how it was being spent in these 4 different sectors.
And as you pointed out, go ahead, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say, building on what Hunter said, it's about transparency. And to say it's political, well, council members have previously talked about, they were complaining that it hadn't been explained that some COVID relief funding that they approved last year would be lumped into the city's investment in the initiative. And also that the big announcement, many of them really weren't informed about this ahead of time. And so you can't just say it's political. They've been really wanting some explanation and transparency for a long time.
As you point out, this is really the second controversy surrounding this. The first controversy cropped up almost instantly after it was announced, and Councilman Tariq Bokhari has been very pointed in his allegations about this. He tweeted recently, the question to ask is when the mayor knew and when did she know it? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing there, but he also said we're standing on a foundation of deceit already on this topic, and that speaks to those previous concerns. Have those concerns been resolved, or have we just gone merrily down the road?
I think we've gone merrily down the road, basically on those original concerns about the money being allocated. Some council members felt that they weren't given the full story. That seems to be basically in the past. I'm not saying they've forgotten it, but that's over. I was going to go back. Hunter was talking about transparency and the way this was set up. Remember last year when the city started that new way to fund the arts, where they were going to do it in-house, and it was a public-private partnership, a very similar structure. But in the arts plan, the city is doing it, it's in-house. They have hired a person who works for the city to handle this. The city has its own board. And so, and the importance with that is that provides this level of transparency. They are subject to open meetings laws, open records laws. So if something goes wrong, or if people want to know more about what's going on, then in theory, there is an avenue to find that out. When you push it over to the Alliance, it's a black hole. They just can issue a 1-paragraph statement about whatever happened, and that is the end of it. And so just, I think the city got it right with the arts funding, but this they went in a different direction.
And for a long time, Charlotte's been touted for its public-private partnerships, and it makes things happen. And that's true in one end, but it also gives you a little excuse, or not excuse, but an explanation when there are questions to say, well, this part is public, but this is private. And as far as it being political, yes, it can be political, but at the same time, these are very valid questions to be raised.
Would we be talking about this if it wasn't called the mayor's racial equity initiative? If this had just been a brainchild of the Charlotte Regional Business Partnership and they gave it another name, would we be talking about this morning?
I still personally think that we would, just because of the sheer amount of public dollars that are actually going to this initiative. And you have to follow the money, especially when it's taxpayer money or COVID relief money.
And Steve, how do you explain the fact that they have hired this person who's under criminal investigation? She may be innocent, she may be not guilty of anything, but they have hired her. In previous years, that would have been an instant stop. Is this just the result of what's been going on in our national politics, where nothing matters anymore?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think, and it's hard to know, in Ohio, what's going on. And I haven't reported firsthand on this part of the story, but, she was in a political job. There were problems. Maybe they were directly her fault. Maybe she was caught up in it. It's hard to say. It's kind of hard to say that because that her tenure leading this office kind of blew up and had a lot of problems, then her career is over. I mean, that's a pretty tough thing to say. People deserve second chances. So I don't know if it's and the Alliance says they knew about all this. That was in their statement. It certainly seems like it was easy to find out through Google, right? But maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. It's a tough one.
It seems like personal responsibility does not exist, and the buck never stops anywhere, unless, of course, you're poor. We have to stop here, and we'll come back with more in a moment. We'll talk about voter maps going back to the legislature, among other things. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and the Charlotte Symphony, presenting Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6, Patatik, tonight and tomorrow night at Bell Theater, conducted by Kensho Watanabe with pianist Sarah Davis Buchner. Tickets and safety information at charlottesymphony.org. While campaigning for President, Joe Biden promised to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court if given the opportunity. Well, that opportunity has presented itself with the announcement of Justice Stephen Breyer's retirement, and the nominees are being considered. They're all Black women. Already, GOP opposition to that has surfaced. Plus, President Biden has been looking into whether or not to make changes to the makeup of the court. He's appointed a commission to look into that. We're going to examine all of that with history as our guide, Monday on this program at 9.
I'm WFAE climate reporter David Borax. We're tracking the challenges facing Charlotte and other cities as they try to eliminate fossil fuels.
I think that the goal is an ambitious one, admittedly, and it's going to be tough to meet.
Keep up with all the latest climate news and subscribe to our weekly climate newsletter at WFAE.org/climate news. Climate coverage on WFAE is supported by the One Earth and Salamander Funds.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. It's the local news roundup. That's why Steve Harrison is here. He is our political reporter at WFAE News. Katie Peralta-Soloff, reporter for Axios Charlotte. Mary C. Curtis, columnist at rollcall.com and host of their Equal Time podcast. And Hunter Sainz, a reporter anchor for WCNC TV. The North Carolina Supreme Court has sent legislative and congressional maps back to the legislature to be redrawn. And this week, the trial court announced that it will name an outside remapping expert to help them determine whether the replacement maps comply with the partisan limits required by the state court's order. How might that affect things, Steve?
I think that it's probably important to have kind of a third party review the maps because they are going to be much closer this time in terms of partisan fairness, right? I mean, there'll still be differences between the maps the legislature produces and the maps that the plaintiffs produce, but they will be kind of more bunched together in terms of how the possible outcomes. One interesting thing is that apparently in the state Senate, Phil Berger and Dan Blue, the Republican and Democratic leaders, put out a statement that they are working together or trying to work together on coming up with a map. So that was similar to what happened in 2019 after the maps then were thrown out and the new map making process was somewhat collaborative, not fully, but somewhat collaborative. So it seems like there's an attempt this time to try that again.
I was going to say, Mike, when you were a kid and the teacher wanted to make sure you weren't cheating in math and they said, show your work. We don't need just to have the answer. So they're going to have to show their work to make sure there are no machinations going on here. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, the court has ordered the legislature to show how they arrived at the new districts that they're coming up, what the math was that worked that out, because the maps that were rejected were drawn to heavily favor Republicans and seriously dilute both the strength of Democrats and in some cases Black voters. Allison Riggs, an attorney representing one of the plaintiffs, says that raised alarm bells.
And that's very suspicious and problematic, and there was no good justification offered for it.
And she added that experts use statistical analysis to show how the map was
intentionally drawn to entrench Republicans in power, no matter how voters' will changes.
So what instructions on this redrawing did the court give other than that these maps won't stand and you have to show us your work?
The big one, like Mary said, and you said, is show us your work, provide some kind of statistical analysis. And the legislature has been scratching their head a little bit as to say, what exactly does that mean? And then, of course, the Democrats and the plaintiffs say, well, you know what it means. Be fair, draw a fair map. So I think it'll be really interesting to see if both parties can come up with some kind of compromise and present that to the court. Let's see, the maps are due I guess, a week from today. So this will be a big thing to watch next week.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, they have really national implications. In North Carolina, everybody knows it's pretty much a 50-50 state, a leaning Republican, I would say. But the way they're drawn to have 10 out of the 14 or 11 of them, basically they're saying just use your common sense, particularly when they are blasting apart cities. And we see it happening all around the country. And these fights are going on in the states around the country. Now, I will say, because we saw the Alabama maps, that they were taken to court, and a 3-judge panel in Alabama, including 2 Trump judges, said, listen, this violates the Voting Rights Act. But then the Supreme Court stepped in and said, well, you have to use these maps, at least for now, which I think goes toward a trend, seeing this Supreme Court trying to chip away even more at the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Under that, with preclearance, before preclearance was taken apart by the Supreme Court in 2013, these maps would not have even passed muster because they would have had to have been pre-cleared. So this is what we see.
The Alabama case was fundamentally a racial gerrymandering case, which the Supreme Court has previously said is unconstitutional, and yet the Supreme Court is allowing these maps to stand. This case here in North Carolina is based on political gerrymandering, and the court has ordered the things that we've talked about, but Attorney Phil Strack, representing Republican lawmakers, told the court that they need a clear definition of what constitutes the word fair.
Demick does not really
Nope, that's not the right cut. Don't play that one. Anyway, that's what he said. Does the legislature have a clear definition? Have they given them a clear definition, or will they only find out what passes muster when the court says so? In other words, we talked about this, I think, on Monday, Steve. Is this like, I don't know what, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be, it may not have to be, it won't be a 50-50 map. That's probably not going to happen due to kind of the political geography of the state. But like you said, I know it when I see it. And when you see 10-4 on the congressional map, that's not going to cut it. So the question, would 9-5 be better, 8-6, or would the special master be looking for a 7-7 map? That's what we're going to have to see.
And we've talked before that even though we talk about partisan and racial gerrymandering, the way it has come to be, particularly in North Carolina, is racial as well. That whites generally, the Republican Party is predominantly white, and the Democratic Party really includes more people of color. So that is also something that the court is going to have to parse.
So if these maps come back and they are drawn in the court's view fairly, what will that mean for candidates, for voters, for what the state looks like in terms of its complexion, whether it's red or blue or purple?
I think there are a lot of candidates who are going to be, who have announced they're running and who may be considering running, who are going to be looking at these very closely to see even slight changes to their districts can mean a tremendous amount. Kathy Manning is the Democratic Congresswoman who in Greensboro, her seat was just wiped off the map. She has no seat anymore that she can win. So she's going to be, example of someone who may get her seat back. She may be able to continue her career in Congress, or she may be out of a job. I mean, as she is now. So I think there's going to be so many people. There's kind of this like macro level of like, how many seats will Democrats claw back, both at the state level and the national level? And then there's so much focus among individual candidates of, can I win this seat now? Do I have a chance?
And Washington will be looking at this very closely as well, because the 2022 midterms is a very tough map and cycle for Democrats right now. And before, Republicans were thinking that they could win the majority with just by redistricting and giving themselves that advantage. Now people will be looking at that very closely because it might be a matter of a few seats that will determine which party wins the majority.
So when it comes to COVID and changes because of COVID, it's beginning to look like the front of a Walmart on Thanksgiving night with people rushing in that case, for the entrances, we're now rushing for the exits. Several northern states, including New York, and along with Illinois and California and Oregon, have announced that they are dropping mask mandates now or in the very near future by the end of the month. And Mecklenburg County may be looking at doing the same. What do we know about that?
So we know that the county health director this week signaled that if our trends continue to improve, if our case numbers continue to decline, then he would recommend at the next meeting on Wednesday dropping the mask mandate. A lot of people in Mecklenburg County might be surprised to know that we still have a mask mandate because it is not heavily enforced. However, the indoor mask mandate still technically is in place for places like the grocery store and doctor's offices and public transportation. This comes at a time when indeed our metrics are improving quite significantly. And like you said, all these other, northern states, a lot of blue states have been rolling back their restrictions. However, these are all really heavily vaccinated states as well. So that's something to take into consideration. I don't have Mecklenburg County's vaccination rate in front of me, but I think a lot of people who are still wary about our high transmission rate countywide are very much concerned about what this could mean if these restrictions are rolled back.
Well, Raynard Washington mentioned, he's the new county health director. He mentioned that our positivity rate is down 45%. Hospitalizations are down 30%. But what does that mean? Where do they actually stand? I mean, how many people are hospitalized? What's the rate of hospitalization? What's the rate of positivity? Because for over a year now, the rescinding of the mask mandate has been predicated on having a positivity rate of 5% or less. And the last I heard, we were at 20.
Yeah, I'm looking at the latest county data, which is from last Friday. I think we should get another report today. We're at 26.2%. Which is extremely high, nowhere near the 5% that you just mentioned. Again, the trend, it's about the trajectory of the trends, right? It's going down. At the same time, I think a lot of people are skeptical of the positivity rate because it's taking into account a lot of assumed stuff that we don't know. They don't have data for at-home tests, for instance. But at the same time, it is extremely elevated, and we are nowhere near that 5%.
So public officials have been saying that we are at or are about to reach the point where the virus switches from being a pandemic to being an endemic, meaning that it's here all the time. And we had a guest on the show yesterday who described an endemic as being a situation where a bathtub is draining at the same pace that it is filling. So it's just kind of in the background humming. But the other guest said, yeah, but that bathtub can occasionally overflow. So yesterday on this program, we asked Dr. Catherine Wu, who's a micro and immunobiologist and staff writer on science for The Atlantic, just exactly what endemic means.
Endemic does not really have bearing on how severe a disease is. A disease can be endemic and kill a high percentage of the people that it afflicts. It can be fairly benign, but incredibly widespread. It just sort of kind of, in contrast to pandemic, which I will say is not necessarily the opposite of endemic. Just when we transition into endemicity, the virus is there. It becomes sort of a known entity in our lives. And there is maybe a little bit more stability.
And Dr. Wu also talked about what constitutes the endemic. One thing she stressed is that simply reaching an endemic stage does not mean that we are safe.
I think it's very easy to come up with a sentence, and I've seen this sentence used saying, COVID is becoming endemic. And that sounds incredibly comforting. Like, what happens after the pandemic? We're no longer the pandemic. Thank God. The removal of the pandemic sounds like endemicity. I mean, yes, but gosh, think of all the uncertainty that comes with that. I think there's an enormous range of possibility in the word endemic, and nowhere in that sentence, if COVID is becoming endemic, does it say we dictate what endemicity looks like. And I think that is ultimately where we have to land. We have to remember that if we are the people saying endemic, the virus doesn't really care what we call its current state, right? It's up to us to sort of shape what endemicity is going to look like. And it's as much about our tolerance for endemicity's level as it is about the virus itself.
And of course, tolerance is up to the individual. And as we know, mask wearing is part of our great divide, and there's some intolerance about that. Some will see this as a reason to celebrate these masks falling away. Others will continue to have concerns. One of those concerns might be how dropping mask requirements might actually impact businesses. Could it be that there are people who won't go to a place if there's no mask requirement? Has that been considered? Katie.
Yeah, I mean, you
talk
to people, and some people, even with the proposal of dropping the mask mandate, are still concerned for various personal reasons, whether they have somebody with a bad immune system back at home, or themselves just are weary of the pandemic, like we just heard that we are still in. People have a right to make that choice, and we'll also see businesses, I think, that will still require masks on their own to protect their own workforce. I know that when we saw all those people burning masks the last time some cities were getting rid of their mask mandates, some people at different hair salons around town were still trying to protect their workers and required them here. So I think we'll see that too.
Businesses can require masks just like they can require you to wear pants inside of the building. And that's not something that we typically protest that heavily. But because they are private, they can just say whatever they want. I for the first time in the 2 years, experienced a business kicking out a patron 2 days ago for not wearing a mask. First time. I couldn't believe it. So I do very much think that customers are going to pick and choose where they want to go. I think that'll be evident in places like gyms, which I think, have complied with the mask mandate by large part, especially if they're smaller. I know a lot have been complicit in that, but if people complain about it, if it's hard to breathe, they might lower it. And then some people might say, you know what, it's time for a Peloton, or it's time for me to quit this gym or find a new one. So I think it's going to be very kind of interesting to see how this all shakes out among private businesses.
I had forgotten about the pants requirement. I haven't worn pants in 2 years. Mary.
I was just saying, I was at the gym this morning, Katie, and some people are already treating a mask mandate as a suggestion, not a rule. But I do think, you see some of these governors like Phil Murphy in New Jersey, taking it down because the political sentiment is that we're through with this, but, COVID might not be through with us. So there is always that risk that, you go with the sentiment and also, the dropping cases, and then you'll see a new variant or a surge. And so they really are walking a tightrope here, the politicians in the states, because they know that public just wants to do without this. Some people, I'm going to be wearing a mask for a long time, but, they do know that there's still this danger, and people are still dying of this every day.
Yeah, I'm just going to what Mary said. I think the president's approval numbers specifically on COVID now have fallen into the negative territory. I mean, that used to be one of his biggest strengths through 2021, and his job approval on COVID, is below 50%. So you're seeing these Democratic governors now with an election coming up in 9 months who are now, making this switch because strategically that's where the people have moved.
And the health officials are divided about this, about the wisdom of dropping masks. Dr. Anthony Fauci has said he believes COVID restrictions could end as soon as this year, but he's not saying it by the end of the month. And ABC News medical contributor Dr. Darian Sutton says he thinks universally dropping mask mandates is premature. So is all of this just simply politically motivated, reading the tea leaves by politicians, Steve, very quickly?
Yeah, I think I don't think really at the Mecklenburg County level. I mean, I think Mecklenburg County is at the high level with Democratic governors around the country, yes. And then that filters down to the decisions that local governments make, because it's hard for Mecklenburg County to keep having a mask mandate when California is getting rid of it.
County Commissioner Ella Scarborough has been MIA, and some decisions have been made in her case, which we'll talk about when we come back as the local news roundup continues.
It's been over 4 decades since WFAE began broadcasting NPR news and exceptional local journalism. None of that would have been possible without the sponsorship of our business community. I'm WFAE CEO Joe O'Connor, and during our 40th anniversary, I want to shout out both Providence Day School and Mazda of South Charlotte for their steadfast support. Consider joining them at WFAE.org, and thanks.
Coming up on 1A in 20 minutes, the News Roundup will continue with a look at the national and some international developments as well. More states abandoned their mask mandates. The Fed sees billions in a Bitcoin bust, and the Winter Games, the Olympics, of course, are off to a slippery start for Team USA. That's all coming up in 20 minutes as their panel of reporters look at national news. We'll continue our local News Roundup in just about 40 seconds. Stay with us.
Howdy, I'm Joni Deutsch, and on the latest episode of the Amplifier podcast, we sit down with music historian Tom Hanchett and country musician Bill Noonan to unearth the hidden history of Charlotte country music.
We call it country music, but it's actually music of folks who are missing the country. They've left the old cabin home on the hill and they've moved to the big city of Charlotte.
Listen to the Amplifier podcast on WFAE.org/amplifier. Amplifier is powered by Ortho Carolina.
It's Charlotte Talks and the local news roundup on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with Steve Harrison, our political reporter at WFAE News. Hunter Science, reporter anchor for WCNC TV. Mary C. Curtis is with us, columnist for rollcall.com, hosted their Equal Time podcast, and Katie Peralta Soloff with Axios Charlotte. Last week, we talked about Mecklenburg County Commission Chair George Dunlap's revelation that Commissioner Ella Scarborough is on a medical leave of absence. That gave rise to questions about when this request for medical leave was filed, because she's been absent for months. And last week, Dunlap said there was nothing the Board of Commissioners could do to remove her from her position. But this week, the commission voted to appoint a temporary replacement. Why this sudden reversal?
Well, everything started coming to light. And that
transparency is going out. Well, amazing. Go ahead.
That in due part, of course, came from our good friend Joe Bruno, who has kind of mastered this coverage from the beginning in a graceful way, nonetheless. But I think when all of this started coming out, they had to answer it, and it was a late agenda item just days before the meeting that was earlier this week, and so I think that's what made it where we are today.
So you were at that county commission meeting this week during the process of the commission voting to grant her medical leave, but during that discussion, several commissioners wanted to know if this request was being made by Scarborough or by her children. Why was that in question?
You know, it has been a very difficult story to cover, of course. As much as this person is a political icon, it's also a person's health and personal information to some extent. But rightfully so, we're talking about somebody getting paid taxpayer money. And some commissioners want to know, who are they dealing with? And by law, the statute was reading, this was brought up at the meeting, that the request has to come from the said person. And some commissioners said this has all been a request through email, and we don't know if it's her kids emailing or her emailing.
There was Hunter, I was just going to say, during that exchange, I think you remember it when Susan Rodriguez McDowell, a commissioner who brought that up, used the phrase proof of life. I mean, which was, I kind of, that was a showstopper, going back to that idea of, is Ella Scarborough making this request, or is this her children?
Because Mary, during this period when the council met virtually and they were all on Zoom, there was some question whether some of her participation was actually her participating or whether it was members of her family. Under normal circumstances, one would presume that this would not be tolerated. Yet Ella Scarborough is according to many on the commission, is a legend. So for people who just moved here, talk about her.
Yeah, Ella Scarborough, she is. And you saw folks like Pat Cotham get emotional, and Bill Malik, because she's in the soil. She has been an activist. She was the first Black woman on the city council. She ran for mayor. Even in her latest election, she gets more votes than anyone, because she has been at the forefront of civil rights and representation in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so that's what makes this, yes,
folks want to know, that she's getting paid and it's taxpayer money. But then folks put Ella Scarborough into a different category just because of her history with the city and her devotion to the city. And everyone knows her. She has been at every event, at church events. I mean, when I've lived here, I don't know, since the mid 90s, and Ella Scarborough is somebody that you got to know when you came to the city.
So commissioners voted unanimously to allow her to take medical leave, but they voted on a 5-3 vote to allow her to be paid and to continue to receive her health benefits. But let's see, here's what the discussion sounded like. We have little clips of that discussion. First, we hear from Commissioner Vilma Leak, then Mark Jarrell, Laura Meyer, and finally Susan Rodriguez McDowell.
But I'm so dead set to support a woman who dedicated her life to this community. And for us as 8 people to sit here and disrespect that legacy of a Black woman in history.
I truly believe that the community understands that we shouldn't pull the rug out from under someone that has the legacy that she has.
This is taxpayer money, and we as a board have to separate the emotion and the facts.
Our focus needs to be on governance and not on the individual.
Moved on to discussions over an interim replacement because, as Chair George Dunlap said,
The fact is, Mecklenburg County Board of County Commissioners is a commission of 9, not a commission of 8.
and again, on a 5-3 vote, they approved appointing a replacement for the remainder of her term. Why did those who voted against the move, which would include Pat Cotham, Mark Jarrell, and Vilma Leak, think appointing a replacement was a bad idea? Hunter, you were there.
I'm not so sure if they believed it was a bad idea, and I spoke to them after this vote as well. I believe their logic was they legally still are a board of 9. Ms. Scarborough, Commissioner Scarborough, has not stepped down. She has asked for this leave of absence. She is still a board member, and they have been working as a sheer board of 8 for months now. And they've been able to do the people's work. I cannot remember until actually this meeting when there was a 4-4 failed vote in quite some time now. So it hasn't gotten them into trouble yet. But I think that is still a fear going forward.
And it was, I was just gonna say for the commission, having a 4-4 commission in some ways was easier on them, because when Commissioner Scarborough was attending and voting, just to be honest, there were some votes that she took that her colleagues weren't sure if she was voting the way she intended to vote. And so you had this kind of wild card in some ways hanging over some votes that would be could be a pivotal 5-4. And they were, kind of scratching their head like, did Commissioner Scarborough vote the way she thought she was voting or the way we wanted her to vote? So.
There was yet another controversy during a break in the proceedings at the county commission meeting involving George Dunlap, the chair of the county commission, and WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges. Hodges, in an impromptu question and answer thing as they were walking down a hallway, asked why George Dunlap did not tell his colleagues about previous medical leave requests from Ms. Scarborough, and this was the result.
You are unethical, and I've told you that more than a year ago, and I'm not going to answer any questions that you ask.
Sir, you know exactly what I was reporting was exactly right.
I don't care what you ask.
I know what exactly was reporting.
So my point to you is, you can follow me, you can do what you want to. WBTV and you are unethical.
Okay, I would appreciate if you got the hand up.
Okay, I said you're unethical.
Is it not a failure of county leadership that you did not tell your board about this? That you did not know about the issue? You had multiple commissioners say that they wish you had told them about this when the request was made on April 26th. Why did you not tell them? I don't know who asked the question. Nothing in that email says anything about that. Well, I'm not involved in that.
So why not?
I'm not going to go call you in the bathroom anywhere else. Thank you, sir.
On his Twitter feed, David Hodges says Dunlap never told him what it was that he did that he thought was unethical. But when Dunlap reconvened the meeting, he made a statement clarifying his choice not to speak to Hodges because he said people would likely see the conversation, which you just heard, that had transpired in the hall. And he wanted to make sure his message, his version, was heard.
Please record this. It's been more than a year, and it continues to be the case that I do not talk to David Hodges. I am not afraid to talk to anyone at WBTV, but I do not talk to David Hodges. I have made it clear to him that has not changed, and I don't expect anything to change in the near future. I am certainly willing to talk to all TV stations and have done so and will continue to do so. But if WBTV wants a quote from me on any question, they better send somebody else other than David Hodges.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we already have, but anybody know what this is all about?
So David got the emails of the first time that Commissioner Scarborough had put in a medical leave request, and it dated back to October and then another one in December. We remember there was no action ever taken. Nothing was voted on at all. It was basically kept under the rug. And Dina Diorio, the county manager, even apologized for that at this last meeting. And so David had every right to ask, what about that? You have commissioners, you have the public who are asking why this was never brought to light until this third request was made. And so he's going to go get answers. I don't know what has happened in the past, of course, between all of them, but it added to the chaos and ungracefulness that this meeting was.
Well, and I think commissioners were upset that they were just now hearing about this request, but also Ella Scarborough hasn't been heard from in years. She hasn't weighed in, aside from simple votes via Zoom, for a very long time. So no one has publicly addressed her absence. So even though we are just now finding out about the medical leave requests, it's not like county commissioners were regularly discussing the well-being of their colleague. And I agree. I think David had every right to ask about this. I think that the public has a right to know where their money goes. And I personally, as a member of the media, red flags always for me go up when an individual or one single news organization is attacked for something so singular and also so unspecific. I mean, being unethical is a pretty nebulous thing to call a member of the media, but I digress.
Clearly, George Dunlap does not believe that WBTV is on his side, but I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
My God.
But he does not shirk from a fight, Mary. George Dunlap never shirks from a fight. Is this about more than just not keeping his cards close to the vest?
I'll leave you to parse what George Dunlap's motivations are.
Okay. Charlotte FC, the football club, the soccer team is about to launch at Bank of America Stadium as our stadium improvements for that new team. What are those improvements, Katie?
This is about $50 million worth of improvements that have been underway for quite some time now to ready the team for their first match coming up in just a few weeks here. We have some pretty impressive things, new amenities at the stadium, including a central tunnel where all the players will run in from. There's a very fancy new locker room. There are improvements to the concourse. There's new seating areas, like premium seating areas for fans that can accommodate, I believe, 150. I might need to double check that one. Anyone who's driven by Mint Street has seen the new entrance with the giant kind of LED screen. All of these things will be visible to anyone who goes to Bank of America Stadium, from Panthers fans to fans of Billy Joel coming up. Of course.
And how much of the $50 million comes from the city? Do you know?
I need to double check that one.
All right, it's all right. Recently, Ramp CLT, operated by the nonprofit Dream Key Partners, ran out of money for their efforts to help with rent and mortgage and utility payments from pandemic relief money allocated to Charlotte and to the county. And this week, they announced they are reopening after receiving an additional $22 million in funding. Hunter, where is that money coming from?
So it's coming from the state and federal governments. And so they will be getting this new money, and new applications will reopen after being abruptly closed. They will reopen on March 1st.
How much money were they originally allocated, and how was it spent? Who benefited, etc.?
Yeah, so they were given millions. The city was, and the county was given millions, and then it was kind of filtered through this dream key, and it was spent on utilities and rental assistance. If we remember, the city of Charlotte really focused in on helping people with utilities for it. The county spent their money helping 18,000 households with rental assistance. So it's really helped a lot of people. I think the average household was receiving like $7,000 from all of this. It just, of course, was quite some big news when everybody could no longer apply.
So I have about 30 seconds left. Once the money hits their bank account, they'll reopen applications under the name Ramp Char Mech to better reflect the scope of their services to the county. Who will be eligible? How much might they receive?
Yeah, so I forget the eligibility criteria. There's a long list of that, probably on their website as well as the counties. But I do know that you could get several $1000s if you do qualify.
Well, it was a big week for the Hornets. I know Mary Curtis knows about this because she's about to perform at the halftime show, but it was particularly big for the LaMelo Ball. And I knew that no one on this panel could adequately explain what happened. So in the spirit of public radio, we have gone to absolutely no expense to bring in Eric Spanberg, our resident Hornets expert, who isn't on the panel this week. We've just given him exactly 53 seconds to explain.
Happy Friday, Mike. Even though I feel certain that you have already devoted ample time in this week's news roundup to your favorite statistic, the triple-double, allow me to note that our young friend LaMelo Ball made the All-Star team this week. Yes, LaMelo and the Hornets are struggling through an abysmal 6-game losing streak at the moment, but hope abounds. Tonight, the Hornets play the Pistons, who are the NBA's most helpful foes when it comes to snapping a slump. As for LaMelo, at age 20, he becomes the 4th youngest player in NBA history to be an All-Star. And the 3 players who were younger than him remain on a first-name basis with most of us: Kobe, LeBron, and Magic. Oh yeah, the All-Star game is February 20th in Cleveland. I'm sure that you and many others will be watching. Have a nice weekend.
Yes, and have a nice weekend to our panel. Mary C. Curtis, who will be doing her Zumba routine at the halftime show at the Hornets. She's a columnist for Roll Call. Hunter Sines from WCNC TV. Katie Peralta-Soloff from Axios, Charlotte, and Steve Harrison from WFAE.
Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte. Our executive producer is Wendy Herkey. The senior producer is